It's going to be tough to know. I'll look it out. I wasn't sure which way to go, so we're only going to do half the din today, and half next week. Do two shorts instead of one really long one. Okay, Machvas shemetagnin, a pan that you fry in, pirush. So you pour in oil as part of the baking. So machvas shemetagnin, a machvas that you fry in. The way you kasher it is with hagola, so you don't have to do leaf into it. And if it's a very long pot, mesim chetzia, so you can't fit it into a bigger pot to fry to kasher. So what you do is you put in half it, and you mesim chetzia acher. So you flip it over and you kasher the other side then. And if it's really so big that you can't, even by putting in both sides separately, you're still not going to get the middle. Then malabna them, so you could do leap into the middle. We believe in kol duhu shekashrus or love sagula, and if you're doing that, then it's okay to do just leave in kal to kasher the middle. And that's how you kasher. Okay, so we finish with that. So the Machvas says what you do is you kasher with hagola, and he then gives you a practical way. It says that it may not be practical to do hagola to this kind of a pan, so therefore you do leave them to the middle. You do two sides and you do the middle. Now the Ramah says v'yesh machmir and lavin hamachvas. There's some have a chumrah to say that you have to do leave to this kind of a pan. Believe in kol duhu, but the truth is, it's with any kind of a libun. If you do libun kal, what we call libun kal, a minimal libun, that's just kashrus on the other side. That's good enough to kasher this kind of a pan. And the reason for that is because since the libun here is only a chumrah, we've had this before, and here's the Prima God makes like a point of it, but we really use it to explain the earlier Rama, that anytime you're doing libun that's just as a chumrah, then you're allowed to do libun kal, because there's a sheet on Aruch that what we call libun kal is really libun. So since some hold like that, so it's like a tzira, if you say it's like a mamanashach or a seiko, but you want to do that, maybe you don't have to libun at all, and if you need it, maybe this is considered libun. Mm-hmm. So because of that, you're allowed to do libun kal whenever it's a chumrah. This is at this place is where the Prima God makes more of it to do with it, but it was really sort of how Prima God earlier, really a Rama earlier also.
There's no svara that even if it's not libun, well, even if it's not libun, but this is all the libun you need.
You're saying is maybe there's a third type of kashering. There's hagola and libun, and there's a third type when people have like a in between kind of a vliya. You need an in between kind of a kashering. There's no makar to that.
You need real libun.
Right. So what you do is right. That's correct. You need libun or hagola. So if you need, but it was saying since it's only chumrah to need libun, so you can get away with what we call libun kal. The Hagoy Ismaili who says it doesn't say it's libun kal. He says it can't be after real libun, so it must be when it says libun, it's just an exaggeration, and this is all you need.
Does the Ramah really hold maker adin like that? You know, he will machmer all over, but really maker adin. He holds anytime you need libun, that's good enough. Was that true?
No.
Somehow I got some.
No, he said wherever you need libun.
Maybe libun really the Ramah holds really maker adin, like mashal tzchak or something. You can be saying on the.
No, by no means. It's by no means. No. Mordechai is a different thing. The Mordechai is that that libun kal can take the place of hagola. But the Agoyes Maimoni says that libun kal is real libun. When we say in the Gemara you have to nitzesis nitzim, that's an exaggeration. It doesn't mean that. You don't need that far. It can't be that anyone would be mechuyev to do that. Elamai, you need this new thing called what he describes as libun, which is not what the Gemara says, and that's what you need.
Wait. All right. Okay, so and you say we don't know like that.
No, nobody. We don't. I mean, I think we for sure don't know like that. No. It's just, but when mitzaref that shita, in certain cases when we're doing it just as a chumrah, so then we can say, okay, you know what, you only do the chumrah anyhow, so you can be mitzaref that shita.
When the Mordechai says that libun kal is enough, he's doing it even though he definitely holds that's not libun. But he says place of hagolah, it's good.
That's fine. Okay, that's good. He's doing the place of hagolah. B'noyagin lavin l'chachil. The Rama says so. The minute is to do libun. Meaning, because to follow this yesh machmirin, miusagre b'hagolam ein by gumois, but b'diavad, if you weren't able to do libun, or it's not possible, you could do hagolah if it doesn't have gumois. Meaning, if there isn't a problem, this is like sort of the second problem that it might be this kind of a pan has a lot of places where stuff can get caught. Then you need libun kal for a different reason, not because of to get the bli out, but to get the be'ena. So that's like a side point. But so Rama ends up that the minig is like the machmirim over here, that if it's possible, you should do libun, and if not, you should do hagol. Okay. the thing that people think of first when they think about this din is what we're going to do next week. Okay, which how the din applies to what we call frying pan. Okay, and whether that's what we're not going to talk about then. Okay, so but look, what's the machlokes over here? What's the Machvas brings that there are some hold that you do hagola and some hold you do leaf. so the Torah and the Mishnah should bring it's really from Aruch that he says a story like this. The Aviezri says that when his father died, the Talmidim told him afterwards that his father held that a Machvas needs leave. Okay, now his father wasn't around anymore, so he had no idea why he held like that. Obviously, he had never heard that shita, and it was a chiddush to say like that a Machvas needs leave. So he said he couldn't figure out why it should be true. He says, what should be the difference whether you fry in oil or in water? If you cook something in water, you need hagala. So what's the difference if you cook it in water or you cook it in oil? It should be the same thing. One should be different than the other. And he says everyone's mekel, the minhag everyone's mekel. And he says, and if you look around, he brings a whole bunch of halachos that talks about pots and things like that. No one says any differences between one and the other. So he gives up. He doesn't get it. So he basically rejects what his father says because he doesn't know he doesn't see any makar to it. There's any basis for why that should be true. Okay. So the Rosh himself says he has a svara to explain the Machmirim. The Rosh doesn't hold like it, but he has a svara to explain the Machmirim. He says like this. He says if you fry something up in a pan, then sometimes what happens is the oil all burns out, and when the oil all burns out, you're left with a dry food touching the side of the pot. So in that case, so you're going to need leaving, because what you ended up doing is you ended up not cooking with a liquid. And it's not that these people hold that oil is different than water. Like Davi, as he says, what's the difference? What's different water than a liquid? Is a liquid. So he says, no, it means is that the stuff dries up and it becomes caked onto the walls, and at that point you're cooking in a way that needs leaving. Okay. So he says, but the Rosh says that. So maybe that's the svara. He says, but I don't understand. He says, and if you cook with water, what's special about a frying pan? If you cook with water, he says, sometimes you burn the pot with water in it also. So what do you say? What are you being telling me? That it's only because it might burn onto the wall. He says, so it might burn on the wall also. He says, Elamai, what do you see? That when something burns onto the wall, one part burnt on, but the inside of the pot, the inside of the food, still has water in it. So it's considered that you cooked it with water. Okay, that's what he says. He says, and therefore he says, now that's his explanation. His raya is.
That's the Russian explanation?
Yes, his raya is, and it's his raya that the wrong is because, or else it should apply to pot, regular pots of water. Right. He says, so what does this raya prove to me? It proves to me that the inside, since the inside is wet, therefore it's considered that you cook with water. Right. Okay, so now the raya is very nice, but what is he talking about? What's the svara over here? Who cares if the inside of the food is wet?
Yeah, you can have moist food. You can have a lot of foods that have water inside it.
Right. So what is he talking about? So what is he trying to say? How does it show? So somehow he's saying. Okay. Well, see if we can explain this. We'll start by saying somehow he's saying that in this case he says, what would you think if you had a pot and there was a piece of meat floating around the pot, and so once in a while the piece of meat bangs up against the wall? Would you say you need leave? You say no, because it's basically a liquidy pot, and that thing happens to bang in. Why don't you say when it hits the side, it doesn't go in? So somehow blias that have water with them somehow are different than blias that don't have water with them. Okay, so let's put that aside for a second. We'll go to a different thing. Just for a second, maybe we could explain this sheet of this aviashi that you need to do libun in a little bit of a different way.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something?
I just like 3 or 4 things. I want to say something about that. This is talking about for Pesach?
Yeah. So the din, I should have said that. The din in Yeridea is different. That's for next week in Mitzvah Shem. This is for Pesach.
So what? It's a terrible, right?
So we hold Chametz is Yisur ball.
Oh, the Chametz is Yisur ball.
That's what we hold the Chametz is Yisur. So you need to do libun, or else you would never do libun for anything.
Right. Okay. So the Chametz is Yisur ball. Now, the svara of the sheet that says that. Oh, okay, so that's not true. I was going to say sheet that says if you use a tray for oil,
that's exactly what comes to right now.
It's right now.
It comes to right now. So, but that's not. But it's not trade. It's not comes to oil. It's not right. But I'll tell you what I was about to say.
Yeah.
That's the Ramami Palmer who says libun. The way you try to define libun halakol is not whether it's a liquid or a solid, but whether the isser has direct contact or indirect contact. So when the isser has direct contact, you need libun, even if that happens to be a liquid. Okay, so like if you use treif oil, then the treif oil is having direct contact, and then you would have to do libun according to the Ramami Palmer. So now, according to that, without knowing yet what the Rosh says, what we hold. For sure, according to Ramami Panay, if the outside of the thing is burnt, I don't care if there's moisture in the middle. The Ramami Panay says it depends. Is it direct contact or indirect contact? How could I care whether the inside has moisture in it? The direct contact is going to be Isser and the pot. So I'm saying that we could say that this obviously is going like the Ramami Panay. He holds that it has to do with direct contact. So whatever the Rosh said that it has to do with somehow liquid in the middle, he for sure doesn't hold like that. The Ramami Panay for sure can't hold like that. He for sure holds that having direct contact will make Isser. So according to him, this case you would need Liban because there is direct contact. Whatever that means that there's moisture in the middle, it doesn't make a difference according to Ramami Panay. Okay. So now,
what about the Miyat Hashmisha? You think?
That's coming in a second. Okay. Speak along the same lines. We'll get into that in a second. Okay. So now, if so, we could turn it around, maybe by saying that the Aviyaz holds with Ramami Panay. Maybe that'll help us understand what the Rosh says. Because like this, the Rosh says if we have there's liquid. Not like the Ramami Panay. We say is if there's liquid in the pot, then you need Hagolah, and if there's no liquid in the pot, you need Libun. Why is that? So somehow, we're going to use words that we don't understand. Liquids are soft and they don't penetrate as deeply, and solids are harder or tougher, or somehow they have a better connection to the fire. I don't know what you want to call it, and they penetrate deeper into the pot. Okay, we don't know what those words mean, but there's a difference between the way a liquid makes a bliya and the way a solid makes a bliya. Right? So that's obviously some kind of a basis to this. Now, when I have a pot that has liquid and solid, I have a pot of soup with pieces of meat floating around. Why don't I say that there are liquid bliyas going into the wall and there are solid bliyas going into the wall? Why don't I say the liquids are doing their kind of bliya and the solid is doing their kind of bliya? And the answer is obviously because liquid and solid together is like liquid. That's how we treat it. It's liquid and solid is like liquid, whatever that means. We were talking about things we don't understand, but liquid and solid is like liquid, and the only way to get solid bliyas is to be pure solid. So the Rosh is saying, what's the difference? Whether the mix of liquid and solid bliyas is liquid next to the wall and solid away from the wall, or turned around, solid close to the wall, liquid away from the wall. The point of what we hold, not like the Ramami Panay, is that a mix of liquid bliyas and solid bliyas is considered liquid bliyas. That when they come together, the pot is being bombarded with these liquid and solid bliyas at the same time. That's considered liquid bliyas. So that's what's going on here. Yeah, we have a pot. The outside is the solid, and the inside is the liquid. Or the outside is the liquid, and the inside is the solid. He's treating it all the same. He's wrapping it all together, whichever side it comes from.
I mean, when you answered Kasha, I was already I understood that liquid and solid obliges liquid, but I still don't understand what does it help that liquid inside. I mean, if I took that piece of meat that's in that state, right, and I transferred it to another pot that has no liquid in it, everybody's going to say I need Libun, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a kasha. That's what I don't understand.
What do you mean?
If I took this pot that's right now, I took this piece of meat that right now the pot was falling out, just the liquid dried up, and now the pot's sitting resting on the meat is resting on the pot. So he said, no, it doesn't need Libun because it got moisture in it. But yet,
okay. No.
3 minutes earlier, I taken this piece of meat and put it into another pot. I definitely would need Libun. So
I don't think that he means that it has moisture in it, but he means that there's liquid inside of it. Everything. If I take a piece of meat without any oil and I put on, there's moisture in the meat also. The same amount, whatever you want to call it, moisture in the meat. If I put it with oil or without oil. The point is, if I cook this thing in oil, okay, think of it in a case like this. Not that I cooked it with. Think about my deep frying the food. If I deep fried the food, so some pieces might burn onto the walls, but there's still plenty of oil in the center of the pot. Let's say I burn my cholent onto my pot. So there's plenty of liquid, not moisture. Not that the dry food happens to have a moisture content of a certain amount. It's that there's liquid, there's like water in the middle. There's mamish water, right? He's saying that there's liquid still left in the middle. So still, I didn't understand it. There's water in the middle, but the outside is dry. The part that's contacting the pot is on the outside. So to which I think the answer is that the bleeds don't only come from the part that actually touches the pot. Maybe we think there's more bleeds from that side, but the whole pot all the food is pushing bleeds into the thing.
I would say the water cooks that. Liquid cooks that.
If it cooks that, absolutely. I'm going to get to that in a second. I'm not sure about that case. But
I thought that's the right was from it.
He's talking about one of his cases is a soup, or he's talking about a frying something. You think about a fryer that there'll be stuff caked onto the walls, but the inside might still have loads of oil in the middle of it. I think that's the kind of case he's talking about. Okay, and exactly his case is really going to get to next week, which is to understand what case he's talking about. It's very practical to understand what case he's talking about to know what Lamaisa is. Okay. But now on to a second question, which you said before. We saw in Halacha Vav that the Mechaber holds that you follow Rav Tashmishay. Right? You follow Rav Tashmishay. So over here, very nice that you occasionally burn food onto the pot. What are the Machmirim saying? The Machmirim is saying since you occasionally burn the food onto the side, therefore that makes a bliya that needs libun on it.
So I guess they don't hold the Miyat Tashmisha.
So
actually, the opposite she does it.
Okay, so you could say right. So you could say that maybe they happen to hold that you follow Rav Tashmisha. You could say the Mechaber Lushi Tasa and the Ramah Lushi Tasa. Okay. Aside from the darchik of saying that, is that you're going to find that we'll find that next week. The Mechaber in your day says you have to do libun, and it's not. And we're putting this whole thing, attaching it to Miyat Tashmisha. It makes it. It's totally not machlokes, doesn't run so smoothly in this thing. That's not what they're talking about. It's a machlokes in, is this considered a liquid bliya or a solid bliya? Where's everyone to talk about? That the Mechaber should say, and who cares? Why does he just say, who cares? Because there's anyhow Rav Tashmisha. And I'm telling you, in your day, he says that you do libun.
I'm just going to say they did. It's not going to say it.
No, what they just saying it. He brings a Rosh who brings the Shiloh, and he should say, and this is not against us anyhow, because we follow Rav Tashmisha. Like he says, I don't know, let's say something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to, so the end, you may remember we talked about this then, but the din is over here. When we learned the din of Rav Tashmisha, there's a Shiloh like this. What's the reason why you follow Rav Tashmisha? Because the Rashba says it's a Drabanan. Since Kashering is only a Drabanan, Chacham said, don't make yourself so meshugah and think about every single case. It's enough just to do the main thing you have to do. That's what Chacham wants you to do. So now what happens if I have a use for Kli that's not a far-fetched thing that happens once in a blue moon, someone puts a piece of bread into the oven. But always use a pan, and once in a while they use it. Not a crazy thing. 20% of the time, 30% of the time that I cook with this thing, I cook in this way that needs libun. Okay. So if you read, the simple reading of the halacha is, you follow Roy Tashmisha. What's the normal way that you use this thing? 30% is not right. The words are Roy Tashmisha. It's not Roy Tashmisha. 30% is not right. So if I use this pot in a way that's 75% of the time it's in a way that needs hagala, and do hagala. But that was the way the Pri Megadim says over there. He says that Roy Tashmisha means right. That it means if the main way that you use it counts, 30% doesn't make a difference. But in our din, the Pri Megadim asks Kasher. He says, what's going on here? What happened to the din of Rav Tashmisha? So he says, you see from here that they hold that if something happens reasonably often, his words are Miyat Hamatzui, it happens reasonably often that it happens that way, that's not considered Miyat Tashmisha. And he doesn't explain, but he's obviously understanding that when the Rashba said the Chacham didn't make you think of all kinds of strange ways of using it, they didn't mean that they weren't giving you a complete blanket head to do whatever you want to. It means the far-fetched ones you don't have to think about, but the ones that happen reasonably often, that's within reason that you have to think that, which far-wise is not so far-fetched. It doesn't fit into go into the simple reading of the words. Okay, the simple words is Rav Tashmisha, and I don't see anybody saying that besides this Pri Megadim who says this, and I don't think that that's accepted. But that's how the Pri Megadim learns this din. That's what the Pri Megadim is on this din. We talked about them, but he's on this din saying that that's the reason why you have to potentially you have to be machmir because of Miyat Tashmisha. Now, if we say that could help us answer another question, which is the Rosh is the Kasha. He says, you, Abiyazri, say that you have to be machmir. He says, so how come he only said it by frying pan? What happened to regular pots of water? Why do you only say by frying something? What's the difference between frying and cooking? So it could be that has to.
I understand this last question.
The Rosh asked on the Abiyazri. He says, if you're right, he says, why do you only say it by frying? It should be always, but it should be same thing you apply to cooking. Cooking. Elamai that since it doesn't, Elamai that you're wrong. So and the answer to that might be. The answer to that is that maybe frying is much more prone to something burning on the sun at a higher temperature. It's not like a pot of soup you cook for 10 hours. And maybe it's a practical thing that frying, when you fry things, it's Miyat Hamatzui that you're going to burn something onto it. As opposed to if you cook, of course it happens that when you cook things they burn. But how often? I mean, his case is a soup.
That's how often you're teretz. You're teretz for this.
Right. How to answer that obviously? How often do you burn a soup? I mean, soup doesn't burn. Okay, it doesn't. So yeah, of course it could happen, but that's not a kasha because that's takamid tashmish. You don't have to kashrus for that. But when you say frying is a much more. The way you do it is much more likely to do it to the point that it could cross the line to become.
So if anything, you're going against the Prima Garden.
Why?
The Prima Garden is not supposed to be. Should not be trying to say shot in the.
Okay, fine. I'm thinking with this we could explain. That would be an answer to the kasha. I mean, listen, it is a strange thing. He's saying the Rosh has this kasha. He says, well, listen, every pot has like that. You can burn anything. So this would answer what they hold on. Okay, and now we'll have we're almost finished, but we'll almost end with a milsa b'dichasa, which is that the reason why the Avi Ezri didn't know about this sheet of his father's until his father died was because when he was alive, to tell his son this din, he'd have to talk to him about his mother burnt cooking all the time. His mother is so calm that she burns the food, therefore we have to do libun. So he didn't want to talk about the kids about that.
So he told him
there's theoretical thing, there's such a thing like that. You know, but to take to the kids, they say, what do you mean? What up to Tashmish? You have to say, oh no, it's me, how much is it? Your mother burns the food. And therefore, that's maybe one. Okay, that's the middle of the dichus. Okay, so now, that's for Pshat over here. Now the Shulchan Aruch here is talking about a frying pan. Okay, and we're talking about the Ramah says l'chatchila is supposed to be machmer to do libun, some kind of a frying. I don't say frying pan, some kind of a thing for frying. And l'chayra, once we heard the way the Rosh explains this din, what the reasons for it are, l'chayra we have other cases that are we have another very practical case of this, which is the way you make rice or you make like a farfel kinds of foods is you cook it with water, but the end of the process is to get no water left in the pot. That's the goal. It's not like cooking noodles. When you cook noodles, when you finish cooking, there's still water in the pot. And then you drain the water out. When you cook rice, the goal of cooking a pot of rice is to get all the water, some of it gets boiled out, and some of it gets absorbed into the rice. Mm-hmm. So in those kind of foods, when you get to the end of the cooking, it's now, there's lots of times there is water, but it's sure common that there should be no water left in the pot over there, and they should be left cooking with dry food. Now, for sure, we have what the Aviezi, the way the Rosh explained it, that there's dry on the outside and water on the inside. That's for sure. For sure, there's half the rice that's touching the pot has no water next to it. Even if there's a little water left, there's for sure loads of dry stuff touching the thing. So that's the Rosh told us. That's the Rosh is saying what the case is over here. That you have dry on the outside and water on the inside. That he says l'kul, that's considered liquid. But according to what the Rosh said, according to the way the Rosh explained this thing, and the Ramah saying here to be machmer l'chatchila, in your day we're going to see it to be machmer completely. So why don't you have to do libun to all these kind of pots? It's true if you make a soup, then it's completely liquid. Save water the whole time. You make noodles. But if a guy did something like cooking up a drier food, or foods that are meant to be cooked till they're dry, so the Russia's things, we're not talking about this case. And here it's even worse because it's here. There isn't water in the middle. I told you beforehand that the way the Rosh explains it, he sounds like he's describing a cholent that burnt on the edges and that there's water on the inside. But in a pot of rice, usually it's dry on the outside with a little water in the middle.
I understand the Rosh like that.
What do you understand?
I don't remember the Rosh. I learned that even if you don't cook sad, but there was once water and therefore it has an effect. But
that's hard to understand. Like you said, every piece of meat's got there's as much water in the piece of meat as there is in my burnt cholent.
I agree with
if I burnt all the way through. So I thought he says there's water. I think that's what he says. There's like water still in the middle, as if the cholent could be burnt on the edges, but still be modest water.
Guessing what? The Russian will be moist.
No, so we know his raya is just as good over here. His raya was no one does lead him to those kind of pots. So we know his raya is right. I think, but the way he explained it, we should have another case that should be just like it. Forget about frying now. Go to cooking now. We have a case of cooking that should be just like what the Rosh said, and we should then say, in that kind of case, you should need to have the libun. Right. You ever heard like that? You ever heard you came to Kashrus pot for Pesach, and they said, did you ever make farfel? Because farfel you do the same way. Right. Rosh kidneys. But you ever made farfel in this pot? Oh, really? You made farfel in this pot? You just have to leave it in the pot. You ever heard somebody say that? No, nobody said like that. So why not? So the Rosh's raya that it's not true is still there. But we don't see why. And why aren't we saying this? Why isn't this going to apply? No, so maybe you'll tell me because you can't do libun because it's too hard. Ramos is only do l'chatchila. Okay, maybe that's the answer. But it's not a No
I might only do the chiluk based on the rush.
Right. So over here, no.
What's the reason that you don't do the living? So we don't have
cases maybe like the rush. It's very similar to the rush. It's not even as good as the rush because there's like no liquid left in it. Although
you think there's no svar? You think we left with no svar that you shouldn't have to do?
Yes, we had the same raya. I told you, the rush is 2 steps. It's a raya. It can't be because no one does this, and then he has a svar to explain it. So we've been talking more about the svar that he says, but we do have his raya. But it's still, and obviously he said the same thing. He says no one ever does that, but we still don't have any explanation. We don't know what's going on over here. Okay, so we're just left with that. And again, I'm telling you,
because I have an answer to that question.
I do not have an answer to that question. No. rather than make it long, because the very practical parts of how you catch a frying pan, or what you're supposed to do to it, which is very negate, I figure we'll do that next week. Rather than make us extra long, we'll do just 2 short ones.
Okay.